Hello, I am Dr. Hannah Klein, and today we have Charles Kehoe, who will be winning our alumni award for this year. You may be wondering why we are doing an award this year of all years. So in the 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice on Criminal Justice in the United States came up with a final report released in 1967. The Challenge of Crime in a Free Society. There were more than 200 recommendations, including establishing an emergency number, which ultimately became 911. And so why is this relevant to this award? Well, it's because in this year of 2022, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary as a department, because many departments started to spring up as part of the call for changing and fixing our criminal justice system. And so originally on June 1st, 1972, Lewis College, as it was called then, which Charles Kehoe attended Lewis College, not Lewis University, it wasn't that yet, announced the first director for the Institute for Studies in Social Justice. The Institute was commissioned to conduct research studies that looked at addressing employment shortages within various law enforcement agencies at the time, based on those findings from the Johnson administration. The Institute resided in the then College of Continuing Education and was responsible for the creation of the Department of Social Justice later in 1972. By summer of 1974, the Institute was a formal part of the College of Continuing Education and was considered an expansion of the Department of Social Justice. In fall of 1975, a master's program was established in the department as well, and in 1983, the department changed its name to Criminal and Social Justice, which would eventually become Justice, Law, and Public Safety Studies. A ton has changed since those first days of our program, but also in our field. And so to celebrate our 50th anniversary, we wanted to commemorate the moment with a Distinguished Alumni Award. Our faculty and staff submitted their recommendations and their nominations of a Lewis alum who has done great things in the field. And then we all voted on the winner, and our winner was Charles Kehoe, who has spent his career working in corrections, serving previously as a past president of the American Correctional Association, and is still heavily involved in adult and juvenile corrections as a consultant, trainer, an expert witness, as well as a certified corrections executive. So we are very excited that you accepted our award. And so we just wanted to ask some questions of you. And our first question is, why did you choose Lewis College in the first place all those years ago?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction and for that interesting history of the program at Lewis and how it's evolved. It's quite a legacy that you're adding to a great university. Well, the reason I chose Lewis College, now Lewis University, in the first place was it was a practical decision. First of all, my mother and father were very committed to ensuring that their children had a Catholic education. And that meant not just K to 12, but K to 16 if it were possible. And so that was one of the first issues that came into play. The second issue was that it had to be affordable. We didn't have a lot of resources. So affordability was clearly one of those issues. And secondly, I had to be able to commute because I lived in Wilmington, Illinois at the time, which is, 35 miles or so south of Lewis. And I had a job working in a supermarket, which was paying a little bit towards my tuition and expenses. And I also could stay at home, so I didn't have to worry about paying room and board. So those were the three things. And then I went to Joliet Catholic High School at the time, now Joliet Catholic Academy. And the Carmelite fathers were very pro Lewis College, very supportive of the Christian Brothers mission of education. And so for a number of my classmates from Catholic High, we all applied and were accepted at Lewis pretty much for the same reasons, because it was Catholic education, affordable, and nearby. So there were probably 10 or more of our students at my classmates at Joliet Catholic. I think it was actually more than that, who went on to go to Lewis and to graduate as alum. And and I still have contact with many of them. Those are the reasons.
So while you were here at Lewis, you helped to found and create the first fire department for the college. And you've told me this story before, but I'd love to share it more widely. What made you to decide to be involved in that process, and what did that process look like? Because I didn't know you could just sort of start a fire department.
Well, I don't know that there were any student operated volunteer fire departments on any college campus back in those days. I think at one point we kind of prided ourselves that if we weren't the first, we were certainly among the very first to be initiated. What had really transpired over the years was that there had been several fires at Lewis College over the years that had done considerable damage. In fact, in one of the yearbooks, it talked about the millions of dollars in damage that had been done by fires over the years. Part of the problem was that the only fire company to be able to respond at that time was in Lockport. And the canal that separates Lockport from Lewis College oftentimes would have slow moving barges going down. And if the bridge was up, fire trucks couldn't cross, and it gave that much more time for the fire to do its damage. So in January of 1963, the Music Theater Hall, which was formerly an aircraft hangar, kind of kitty corner from where the old dining hall used to be, caught on fire in the middle of the afternoon. And the fire department responded from Lockport, but got caught by a bridge. And by the time they had arrived at the scene, it was, as I recall, a very windy day. Most of us were in the dining hall if we weren't in classes, and somebody came in and yelled that there was a fire. And, this was a building with a kind of a dome shape, and the wind got in and it just took over. And the damage was pretty much done. By the time the fire department got there, it was beyond saving. And it ended up burning to the middle of the ground, and burning to the ground, including the bookstore, which had all of our textbooks for the second semester. So there was a lot of damage done. And after the fire, some of us I was a member of the Wilmington Volunteer Fire Department at the time when I was home, and so there were a number of us who had an interest in firefighting. A couple of the guys at Lewis, their fathers were members of the Chicago Fire Department. A couple of others were members of volunteer fire companies like I was. And so we approached Brother L. Paul, who was the president of Lewis College, and pitched the idea of a student-operated volunteer fire department. And much to our delight, he embraced the idea. He thought it was a great idea. And being on the Wilmington Fire Department, I thought it was a natural fit for me. I really embraced the idea as well. And so from that spring and winter, we did a lot of planning and talking about what it was going to look like and what we needed in the way of equipment. And by the fall, Brother Paul had secured for us a donated fire truck, which was 1940 something vintage. It was a pumper truck, but it got the job done. And then we were able to buy turnout coats and helmets and boots and the equipment that we needed. And then Brother Paul also arranged, and one of the other guys on the department arranged for us to have training from the Lockport Fire Department and even from the Chicago Fire Department. So they wanted us to be very well trained and to understand what to do. So that's what got us started. Most of the time we responded to either false alarms, or once in a while there'd be a car fire or something like that. But thank God we didn't have any major fires from then on. I wouldn't be presumptuous enough to say it was because we had a fire department, but we clearly would have been able to respond. And I don't know if it's still going or not. Is it?
I don't think we still have a fire department. I think Romeoville luckily
Yeah.
has a much more established program, but these days, luckily, we don't have airplane hangars catch on fire. We have popcorn bags in dorm rooms catch on fire.
Yeah, really. Well, I don't know how long the department was in existence, but we did feel that we had a commitment, and of course, most of all, to the safety of the faculty and students and guests at the university as well. So, and there was, I think, one or two occasions when we were called to assist Lockport when they had a grass fire or something. There was one refinery that caught on fire and they needed extra equipment, and we proudly responded to that. But it was a great experience. It really was.
It's definitely a unique Lewis experience as well.
It is unique. I still have my patch hanging on the wall.
So I will admit that we didn't have a criminal justice program until 5 years after you graduated. And so we respect that you weren't an official criminal justice major, but you were a psychology major, which also sits in our college that we sit in now, the College of Education and Social Sciences. And so what made you decide to study psychology, as many of our students minor in it or even double major with psychology now because of its alignment with criminal justice? What made you decide to go that route?
Well, it was, like many students, I was bouncing around in search of a major to kind of focus on. I had tried several and just couldn't feel the fire in me to really embrace that, although I respected those fields. And it was really, I would call it divine intervention, I guess. But one day I was in the cafeteria and Lloyd Lee, who was, I'm trying to remember whether his title was director of admissions or whether he was one of the deans of students. I don't recall. He was a wonderful, wonderful man, very much in touch with the student body, knew most of the students by name. He was highly loved and highly, highly respected. And he came to me in the cafeteria one day and knew that I had been kind of struggling looking for a major. And he said that the psychology department was taking a tour of Manteno State Hospital and invited me to go along with them. And I did. And on a personal note, I remember as a child being 5 or 6 years old, maybe 7, my grandfather had a period of time. He had lost his brother, his one and only brother, who died in an automobile accident, and he lost his wife to the flu epidemic in the 1920s. And he never really dealt with that grieving very well, and men were not supposed to do that at the time. But he had to take on 3 daughters who were pretty young at the time, and it kind of caught up with him in the 50s. And he had a what I think we would now refer to as an anxiety attack or a period of pretty steep depression, and he ended up going for treatment to the state hospital for a period of, I think it was maybe 6 or 8 weeks. But I remember going down there, this was at Kankakee with my mother, and seeing these huge wards of people in these metal hospital beds, all crammed into these wards, and the smell wasn't always very good. And even though the grounds were beautifully manicured, the patients were just kind of stuck in these large dormitories. There were no individual rooms at all. And that was imprinted on my brain. So on that day that I took the tour of Manteno with my fellow students from Lewis, a lot of the flashbacks came back, and I remember that. And so I was talking to some of the patients, as we were encouraged to do on that tour. And on the way home, Mr. Lee sat next to me on the bus and said, I noticed you were talking to a lot of the patients. You seem to be comfortable doing that. I told him the story about my grandfather, who, by the way, did very, very well after his treatment in the hospital. Even though the wards were big, whatever happened to him there caused him to have a very wonderful life right up until his passing about 15 years later. But so Mr. Lee said, would you be interested in joining the psychology department and taking that on as a major? And I think that trip was really a tipping point for me. It's funny how something that can be seen as, well, this is a day off from school I can get, how it can be life-changing. And it's one of those many moments that my time at LewisU College was defined my path for the rest of my life. And clearly I was one of them.
So how did you make the jump then from psychology to corrections? Because we recognize, like, in corrections, mental health issues are rampant and there are tons of other issues. But how did you, as a psychology major, end up in that world?
Well, when I joined, I think that tour was in my second year, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Lee unfortunately passed away of a heart attack, I think, not long after that. There's a whole page devoted to him in the 1963 yearbook, I think it is. Wonderful man. But anyway, by the time I got to my junior year, I was really running out of money for school. And it was at the time of the Vietnam War. I went down to the Navy recruiter in Joliet and said, sign me up. And he started asking me what I was doing. And I told him I was at Lewis. And he said, why don't you go back to school, continue going to school, finish your sophomore year. And then at the end of the summer, come and see me and let's see what we can do for you. I said, okay. And so I went back and with the full intention of enlisting. And in the meantime, one of my Catholic High friends who was going to Lewis was telling us in the cafeteria one day. We did a lot of work. The cafeteria was really a brain trust. It's where everybody gathered. And he told us that he had gotten a job at the Illinois Youth Commission Reception and Diagnostic Center on McDonough Street in Joliet. And it was paying like $315 a month, which we thought was big money then. And they were looking for quote unquote guards, although they called them youth supervisors at the facility. And so all you had to do was go up to Chicago and take a civil service exam. And if you passed, you might get a call. And so I did and passed the test. And then in the early summer of 1964, between my sophomore and junior year, I got a call from the Illinois Youth Commission Superintendent's office, and they sent me up for an interview. And I went in, and the superintendent took one look at me and said, "How old are you?" And I said, "I just turned 21." And he said, "You're way too young, and you're too young. You're a little too young, and you're way too small for us. We have a lot of young men here who are much bigger than you are, and we don't want to put you in any harm's way," kind of thing. So I said, okay. And I was pretty discouraged, but I left, went back to my supermarket job, which I liked and had good bosses. But In August, one day when I was at the supermarket working, my boss got a call and asking if I was there, and he told me that the youth commission was calling. He knew I had applied, and the director of dormitories said to me, "Are you still interested in the job?" And I said, "Yes, but I'm about the same size I was, and I had been a lifeguard too, so I was working 5 days a week as a lifeguard and 2 days a week in the supermarket, and so I was keeping very busy, trying to earn every dime I could, and." So I said to him, I'm about the same size. He says, "That's okay. If you're interested, go take your physical at Elgin State Hospital, and we'll contact you." And I did. And right after that, they called and said, "We want you to start on August 15th." And so I worked on the 3 to 11 shift, which allowed me, and because I was making that tremendous sum of money, I was able to pay my tuition for my junior and senior years. And that was pretty much it. I mean, after that, I was working in the reception diagnostic center, was where all the juvenile who had been committed for delinquent acts came to in Joliet, and then they were sent out to all the juvenile correctional facilities across the state. And so the kids would stay there about 4 weeks, and each dormitory had a psychologist and a social worker, and our job was to be the quote unquote guards, or to supervise the kids at night. And I had a really great supervisor. And so when I had to work a double shift, he would allow me to bring in my textbooks. And so I would go to school at Lewis from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and leave and go down and work at the youth commission. We were working 40 hours a week. And I knew after about 2 weeks of doing that this was a career I really wanted to pursue. And one of the social workers in the dormitory, a man by the name of Dale Keith, had a big sign on a big plaque on his wall that said he was a member of the Academy of Certified Social Workers. And I had such respect for him. I said, someday I'm going to have one of those. And I do. I graduated from Lewis, and then went on to the University of Illinois, where I got a master's degree in social work. And I've been in corrections ever since. I worked for about 18 months for the Department of Children and Family Services. They gave me a stipend to go through graduate school if I worked for them for a year and a half after I got out. And so I did work in Children's Protective Services, but I primarily work with delinquent kids, even in that agency too. So for the most part, I've been in juvenile and adult corrections since '64.
So corrections can be so draining. There's so many, challenges, traumas, mental health issues, all of these things. What has kept you inspired since the mid-60s to continue to stick with this field and, even grow within the field? And how has Lewis helped with that? How have you, inspired yourself and pushed yourself to become such a leader in the field that you are?
Well, thank you. There's a lot of wonderful people in this field. I think, first of all, my mother was the eternal optimist. And, she, when polio was going on and we were living in Chicago at the time, we had some friends who were in iron lungs and kids who were our age, and it was awful. And when we would complain because people didn't go to the beach in the summertime in August, because there was this fear that polio was being spread by a virus that you could get in the water. I don't think it turned out to be true, but, when we'd complain about how hot it was, our mother would say to us, you're not flat on your back in county hospital and an iron lung. And that really was very sobering very quickly. We would get our mind right real quick. But I think, as far as corrections was concerned, I would have to say that I've been very, very blessed with a lot of men and women mentors over the years who were really tireless professionals, who were the pioneers in what I would call contemporary correctional thought about where are we now and where do we need to be. I really feel every day of my life that I stand on the shoulders of some of the best people in the field of adult and and juvenile corrections. It was a blessing that I had the people who really got me through some difficult days and showed me the way and blazed the trail. So, there's tough days in this business. I've had 3 very dear friends of mine who committed suicide. We've seen deaths of inmates. I worked for John Howard Association for 4 years, and we investigated a lot of suicides and murders. And I used to go to Stateville Penitentiary on a regular basis and Joliet on a regular basis. And, you see some really great people who are incarcerated for some really unfortunate, terrible choices that they made. But I think you have to keep going. And as I reflect back now with the students that I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University, I have to say, when you look back of just in one career, how far corrections has gone, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I know we have a long way to go, and there are several issues regarding social justice in our whole criminal justice system. But if you're only looking at it in the last 10 years and not the last 50, then it may not seem like the progress is that advanced. But when you look at it over a half a century of correctional work, it's pretty amazing. We've developed a standards and accreditation process. The federal government has created the Prison Rape Elimination Act. Our research is 1,000 times better than it was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, research in corrections was pretty minimal. Today, it's cutting edge on all sorts of different levels, not just with inmates, but employee and staff wellness and working with mental health issues. So, I get up every morning excited about, still being in the fight.
What would you say is your proudest achievement in the field of corrections? I mean, you've listed so many incredible things that have changed over the past 60 years. And I would argue that even in the last 10 years of getting rid of, federal solitary confinement for juveniles has been, a really huge thing. So it can seem year to year, maybe there hasn't been a ton of progress, but there's certainly been a ton. But what would you say is your proudest achievement within the field?
Well, in this business, it's pretty difficult for one person to have singular achievements because they all come about through teamwork. And if you're not surrounded by good people who you can trust and who have your back, it's difficult to accomplish things. Things don't get accomplished just by one person. But I think in terms of achievements or experiences that I've had a number that I'm very proud of, and I feel very, very blessed. But I have to say, probably my proudest time in this business was when I came to Virginia. I was the first director of the Department of Youth and Family Services. Youth Services had been under the Department of Corrections, and the legislature wanted it in a separate standalone agency. It's now called the Department of Juvenile Justice. So I was hired by Governor Belials and served the last 4 months of his term, and Virginia governors can only run one term. So Governor Belial said, if you come to work for me, you may only end up with this job for 6 months, because when I'm out, my successor can appoint whoever they want. And I said that I was willing to take that risk. Well, as it turned out, Governor L. Douglas Wilder was elected and reappointed me. And I had the privilege and the honor of working for him for his entire administration. He is a fantastic man. And he was, for all of history, he will be respected as the first elected Black governor in the United States. And that had so many spin-off kind of opportunities and experiences for all of the people, especially those of us who were in the department head positions to be exposed to his experiences, and he certainly shares those with us to this day. And now that I'm an adjunct faculty member at VCU, the criminal justice program there is housed in the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs. So I still get to see the governor once in a while, and he's a fantastic man. He's just absolutely inspiring and empowering. And I think if nothing else, I can say that has to be one of my proudest moments, was to be able to work for him.
I really appreciate what you say around teamwork. As for a lot of it, it's to make change, to make policies, to do so many of the things that you have been a part of. You've gotten to be a part of it, but it is very cool also to get to lead and be that leader. And so I want to finish with one final question around leadership, and sort of, what do you want current Lewis University students, both psychology and our justice law and public safety studies students, to know about the criminal justice field and the impact that they can make going forward? What are your words of wisdom to the current students? I mean, I'm sure you share stuff all the time with your VCU students. What can you share back with your fellow future alums?
Well, my wonderful wife and I have two sons who are both in law enforcement. And my wife was a teacher, and ironically, both of our daughter-in-laws are teachers. So in our family, you are in public service. You're either in law enforcement, criminal justice, or you're in teaching. And one of the things I think I try to convey to my students is, when you're in service to the public, when you're a public servant, there isn't any more noble profession. I mean, I'm sure doctors and nurses and people who all trash and do all the other things that keep our world functioning. All of these things are noble professions, but I think working in the public sector is a great honor. And if you can work in the criminal justice system and work towards public safety and work towards social justice, because it's not just about locking people up. It's about really helping the individuals who come along who have some really insurmountable kinds of problems and issues that cause them to violate the law and to break the law. And these individuals need help too. And there's no greater feeling in the world than seeing somebody that you had worked with as an inmate, so to speak, later in life doing extremely well as a member of the community. Even if you didn't know them, just to be exposed to people who've been incarcerated and have turned their lives around. And probation and parole and community corrections, these are all pieces of, and working in the courts. I had the privilege of working as a court administrator in Michigan for 15 years. And the judges I worked for were absolutely the best human beings I've ever been around in terms of their ability to understand justice and what that means, as well as with the attorneys, the prosecutors and the defense attorneys. So it's a great field. If it's something that gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you want to go back and get in the fight, then that's the fire in your heart that I really think you need to have to be there. There have been some people who've gone into corrections who shouldn't have been there and who've done some not so good things. They've abused people and taken advantage of the system. But for the most part, 99% of the people I think in the field of corrections are dedicated, caring human beings. I would say this to the students, that if you're really interested in being in the criminal justice system, then I really encourage you to get involved with professional organizations. If it hadn't been for my involvement in the American Correctional Association, I would have never made the contacts with people that I've made. And I now can say I have friends in almost every state in the country. And we still get together at the conferences and we still talk. And I can pick up the phone, and if I'm puzzled by something, I can talk to people. And all that is to the credit of a professional association like the American Correctional Association. There's also American Probation and Parole. There's police organizations. There's courts organizations, but it's those organizations that provide the continuing networking that you have to have after you get out of school. If you get out of school and you let your education stop, and you're not committed to lifelong learning, you're not making the contacts, and it's going to be difficult to grow. So that's what I would say.
Earlier, you alluded to, the Christian Brothers, mission. And we have, those 5 key pillars of knowledge, fidelity, wisdom, justice, and association. And while you were talking, I was like, there's the word association, there's the word, knowledge, and this is exactly why we wanted someone like you to be our very first distinguished alum, because you represent everything that Lewis University is and has been for its existence, even when it was Lewis College when you were here. And so we really want to thank you for your service to this field, even though, again, you weren't an official member, but now we can say that you're an honorary member of our department. And so thank you so much for taking time out. And I'm going to go ahead and invite you to say anything else, and then we can end the recording to share with our alums. If there's anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, I just want to close with this, and thank you very much for this real honor. I'm very humbled by it, and very proud to be an adopted part of your wonderful department. I think at the time students are going through Lewis, they may not really understand the education that the Christian Brothers provide. And I am very proud to say that I have a Christian Brothers education. Our youngest son also has a Christian Brothers education. He went to Calvary College, which is a Christian Brothers school in Baltimore. My wife had the privilege of teaching there. My brother-in-laws in St. Joseph, Missouri were Christian Brothers boys. My father-in-law was a brothers boy. And, I really just kind of by accident, because Lewis College was available, became a Christian Brothers product, a brothers boy, so to speak. And, until you get to the ripe old age of being in your 70s, you really don't fully embrace what a great, tremendous gift the Christian Brothers give us every day. And even the lay faculty who embrace the principles of the Christian Brothers exemplify that. So I will be forever grateful to the Christian Brothers.